Hi, Susan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Krista. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here today. So I always want to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves to the listening audience in their own words about who they are and what they do, and then we'll get into this interview right away.
Okay, perfect. I'm Susan Grau, and I'm a spiritual medium. I'm an author and a speaker. I've been helping people with grief. I'm a grief expert and addiction specialist. So I've been helping people with grief for a very long time.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm excited to talk to you about the grief. It's part of my jam as well. So I'm excited to unpack that work with you because you're doing such a beautiful job in that space. My next question I've kept in forever. I'm always just curious as we evolve and as we change as a society and as a culture, how the landscape of our relationship with the divine changes as well. And obviously we're in a very modern world now. Most people that come to the show have a spiritual leaning of some sort and aren't really tied to their religion of origin. So I'm curious, what was your early childhood experience? And then where do you sort of see yourself planted in terms of God, the universe, all the things?
I was very young when we left the Catholic Church. So my original understanding was Catholicism. Mm-hmm. And after my near-death experience, which was very young at 4.5, my family left that church. And I don't really know if it was because of what I was seeing and what they were experiencing, because they had some of this gift, or what their reasons were. I never really... As time went on, I just accepted the spirit world because I had seen it. It was just part of the journey for me. It wasn't an extension of me. It was part of me. And so I always believed in the spirit world. I didn't know if I believed in a God or a religion or a Jesus. I just believed in the whole package. And that's how I grew up, and that's how I am now. I just, any path that leads me to the light and that package is where I go.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about your NDE experience. I was really interested. I mean, to have that at so young, they say our memory starts at around 2 years old, but most kids can't really recall even that early in their lives. But I wondered if you're comfortable, if you might tell us a little bit about that NDE experience and how it changed you as a person.
Absolutely. Well, I was seeing spirits floating from animals at 3.5, and I didn't understand anything. I thought that was normal. I don't even think I thought, it just was.
Right.
I didn't think, do they do it? I didn't think anything.
Or that like everyone else was seeing it happen.
Yeah, I didn't think that. It just was. It's kind of like if you go out in the rain and you get wet, I don't look at you and go, are you wet too? I just like, it just was. But at 4.5 years old, tipping on 5, I got locked in an unplugged freezer. I was locked in by 2 boys, an unplugged freezer in a garage. And they closed the garage door and they ran home. It was a very profound experience. I remember being in the freezer just screaming. I was terrified. And I saw, after a while of screaming, my mom said she heard like the sound of a cat in heat. They have a particular sound that's very high pitched. And my mom said, that's what I heard. And I just thought that's what it was, because we had a lot of land. And I remember looking to my right, in kind of to my right, I guess, and seeing these 3 bright lights. And they come as we understand them. And I understood angels. And so I knew that they were angels. And one of them seemed more impactful than the others. And they told me to stop screaming. And I didn't listen. I kept screaming. And then the more impactful one said to me, it's time to stop screaming now, Susie. We're going to get your mama. And of course, I kept screaming. And then she said it again. And she said, we're going to show you something. Of course, now I'm interested, right? Now I'm like, okay, I'm not scared anymore. They're going to show me something. I'm little. I don't really understand, but I'm going. And the next thing I knew, I was at the bottom of a stairway. And it was, I didn't understand what I'm going to tell you right now. I didn't understand at the time, but I do now. Okay. I was looking up these stairs, and I wanted to get to the top of the stairs, and then I was. And there was this beautiful hole in the center, and it was dark. And I studied under Raymond Moody, and he said to me, Susan, that's the tunnel. I called it a well. And it looked like DNA crossing, but I didn't know that at the time. But I knew it was words. And I had this instinct that it was people's prayers or heart's desires, because I prayed already. I knew what praying was. And I asked them, where am I? And they said, you're in the room of heart's desires. And I precociously asked, do you answer all those? And they said, no, Susie. Sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them. And I actually didn't like hearing that. And I remember that feeling because my mom would say to me, just because you want it doesn't mean it's good for you. And I didn't like it. I didn't want to
That's
hear
what
that.
it felt like.
Yeah. But they said it very lovingly. And my mom always did too, for the most part. But I just didn't resonate in that. I didn't like it. And then I looked across and, there were things floating in the room. And I always call them crystals because I don't know what they were, but it seemed that that's what they were. And I remember looking at it straight and I felt sorry for them. I wanted them to have their prayers answered. I didn't understand really why they would say that because it's so important to answer prayers, right? Mm-hmm. Now I understand why we can't have all our prayers answered. But I looked straight ahead and there was this beautiful road. It was, I called it the Yellow Brick Road because it was made of golden pavers. But I also understood the Wizard of Oz because it had already come out. And so I called it, and I still to this day call it the Yellow Brick Road. And it was all these pavers and humans were there and they were paving this path on this path. And I saw them putting the pavers down. It was bumpy and crooked. And I heard them like drop to their knees and saw them, for the love of God, please help me. And saying all these things like needing help. And I felt really sad. And I still to this day can feel that feeling of sadness that they were in pain. And I watched these angels come in and start removing the pavers and going to these pyramids and putting them back in these pyramids that they had pulled them from the bottom. And I knew that was their life journey. And what happens when you pull from the bottom of a pyramid? It gets unbalanced. Mm-hmm. And I saw them go to the top of this pyramid, the angels, and start taking the pavers and paving the path. And I watched the pavers recreate themselves. And I said, what are you doing?
Wow.
And they said, we are the pavers, you are not. All you have to do is walk it. And I said, well, how do you know if you're walking it right? And they said, because we will either bless it or block it. And make no mistake, you can get through it battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Right? I didn't understand. So I came back to this planet doing all the things I shouldn't do. Right? I got into every wall, hit the wall, fought the wall. I was always in a battle with the wall. I'm going to make this happen. And then I'd remember. So I did the same human experience. But anyway, and I remember just thinking, okay, I didn't really understand, but I knew what they were trying to get across in some way, that they were in charge. And they explained to me they bless and block everything. And all you have to do is shift when you hit a wall. Don't try to bang through it. You'll get through it. Shift. And if that doesn't work, shift again until you see us paving your path. It will feel more smooth. It won't feel like a wall. It won't be a hard stop. And then just walk it. And you'll have obstacles. You'll have difficulties. You'll have all those things, but we'll be the pavers. We are the pavers. You think you know what's right for you. We actually know what's right for you. And you have free will. And you can try to make a different decision. And there's hence the battered and bruised, I think. But that will help your soul expand. And we have free will for a reason. And that's what it is, for expansion. Mm-hmm. And they kind of explained to me. So I popped from there to the room of knowledge. And I call it the virtual books now. I don't know what else to call it now, but there was no such thing then. But that's what it feels like, a room of virtual books flying around. It makes me think of Harry Potter. It's so crazy to see it
that's
in my
literally like that I got.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were moving and I saw humans who were what I called humans. They were spirits, but I thought they were humans, and they were deciding their next journey. And I could hear the spirit world saying to them, I think that's too much, honey, sweetie. No. You don't want to do all that. And I could hear them saying, oh, yeah, but I do. I can handle it. I got this. I'm going to learn so much. I'm going to grow so much. And they were somewhat discouraging some of it, but they won free will. Right. And they said, to them, you have free will and we will let you do what you need to do. But keep in mind that free will is there for your soul to expand, which means you're going to have difficulties when you're going through that expansion. And negative and positive are equal in value. They both teach us something, and maybe the negative is actually seemingly negative because it teaches us the most. So they're going through this whole thing and I'm watching it and I'm not really getting it. I understood a little of it. I was still me. I was me.
Yes.
I took me with me. And then I went into the room of companions where there were animals, and I didn't see any of my animals. And I saw this giant crystalline thing. I think now I look at it as a clear quartz. And behind it and inside of it were faces moving. And I tried to reach into it and I couldn't. And I was frustrated. And then I all of a sudden got this knowledge that if I did, I wouldn't be coming back for that lifetime. Like that was the other side, the true other side of the veil. So I stopped, and I ended up in a meadow, and I saw this amazing being up on a hill, on a mountain. And I wanted so bad to be with him, but I knew I couldn't climb the mountain. And then they came over and told me it's time to go. And there's a whole big story behind all that happened, but that's kind of the basic human words for it. The path, it's the most beautiful light you can imagine, colors like you've never seen, flowers that are beyond imagination. If you took a color and you times it by 1,000,000, it's alive. It's so vibrant. It's alive. Everything's alive. And the next thing you know, my mom was hearing your baby's in the freezer for the third time. And she realized, oh my gosh, my baby's in the freezer. And she ran out to the freezer, threw open the garage door. She said I was ashen. And there weren't cell phones then. My mom, screamed, dropped me, ran into the house to call someone. But when she dropped me, I cracked open my chin. I never left the scar. It's still there. And I never got rid of it. And I took a breath. And she sent me to my room. She was angry at me for playing in the garage, number one, we weren't allowed to, and for climbing into that freezer trying to find popsicles that didn't exist in there. She was scared my dad would be mad because she was supposed to turn it towards the wall and bolt it like people did then. They were told to do because children were dying.
Yeah.
And so she sent me to my room. And when I came back from, like that overwhelming experience, I think I woke up basically. She gave me a little butterfly Band-Aid. My dad owned hospitals, so she had all that stuff. And I looked around and there were spirits everywhere. They were under my bed in the corner of the room, down the hallway. They were everywhere. And I was terrified. I thought they were the boogeyman. And I would put the blankets over my head and say, go away, go away, go away. And I did this throughout my life, by the way. And sometimes still today when it's overwhelming for me, I'll say, go away, go away.
Yeah.
But it was my mantra, go away, go away, go away. And they would know they scared me and they'd go. But during the day, I'd play with them. And it was in the living room. And my family called it the creepy room because I would be in there talking and playing to nothing, what they didn't see. Although my mom and my sister had this, and so did one of my brothers, but they didn't. My mom would, don't talk about it, don't acknowledge it. And it was because my mom was on a lot of medications because they thought she was crazy, unfortunately.
Yeah, at that time.
So, yeah. And even my time, I'm 65. So in my time, I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't tell people. So I just had an abnormally normal life that I thought was normal, if that makes sense. I didn't know it was that different because I didn't talk about it and ask.
Right.
Then when I started asking, I realized, so I became a grief and addiction therapist and I worked with people and then it just went from there. I didn't want to be a medium. It wasn't what I planned. I was always a speaker. I loved to speak and I loved to help people with knowledge and they would download stuff into me and I'd just speak it. And so healing is what I love to do, but I did not ever think I'd be a medium. And it just kept evolving. You're going to be what they want you to be ultimately if you let the choices open for you.
You said so many amazing, beautiful things back there. And I think the one that's like really sticking with me is the analogy of the paving and like, the question that I think a lot of us have when we come into this world and we also want to live out our soul's purpose, the question of like, am I doing this the right way? I know I've asked that a lot. Like sometimes when I'm talking to like, God, I'm just like, is this the right way? Like you need to like tell me, like, I feel like this is the right way, but I'm not sure this is the right way I'm supposed to be going. So I love that you said that. And that is such a fascinating story. I have just one follow-up question, but I'm mindful of the time. But when you were, in that transition period where like the light was coming and they were taking you through the different rooms and all of that, did you have any sense of time or was it just going super fast or it just time stopped?
I can explain that to you. So here time is linear. It doesn't exist there. And this is why.
Yeah.
If I were to take you and put you in a dark room and you didn't have or in any room, there are no windows, no calendars, no sunlights, etc. Time would become non-existent to you. You wouldn't be able to keep up with it and it would be non-existent. And that's what it's like there.
Okay. That's interesting. I love that. Wow. That's really cool. I'm glad they went and got your mom too. And that, she got you out of that fridge. I think that would have been such a scary experience to have as a child. to, that would have scared me really bad.
I was terrified. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I do wanted to give you some space here to talk about your upcoming book. As I understand, it's going to be released later this year. And so I have not had the opportunity to read it, but I did want to give us some space here to talk about it. It's called Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons. Please tell the audience what it's about, what its intention is, and kind of what you're hoping it'll do in the world as it sort of makes its way through people's lives.
Okay, so I'm actually writing a second one too, Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, the two-sided mirror and the shadows that bind us. So I'm going to continue in a series basically of what Spirit taught me.
Okay.
And so Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, Wisdom from the Spirit World of Living, Dying, and the In-Between. That's the one we're talking about. And that gets released July 16th. And it's about my journey. It's about healing. It's about spirit. It's about overcoming grief. It's about suicides, losses, overdoses. It's about what the spirit world is trying to help guide us to. It has exercises to do to tap into your soul source. So we hear a lot about soul wounds in this world. And I don't believe the soul gets wounded. I believe we have spirit wounds and we have humanness wounds, and we have two sides to us. We have the soul that is there to heal us, sent from spirit. Because if it's an inside job to fix ourselves, we have to have something to tap into to do so.
There's some place where we're completely intact, right?
Right. That's the soul. That's the soul. And then we have our humanness. So we have two sides. And that has to integrate in order for us to get healed or be healed or deal with grief or anything. So the book is about, well, my second book is all about that, but my first book has that in it. And it talks about the pure love of spirit and what it's like to be there and where we come from and why we come here and what free will actually is. Is it, is everything planned? No. So, these little things that people learn or hear from someone, it becomes their truth. So it's kind of shifting that into what does spirit say about that? Because if we don't have free will, we don't need to be here. And free will is our choices, and our choices help our soul expand. Pretty simply. If I'm planning on being married here and my soul wants to resonate in that and it's in my contract, I'll be married. I might be 95. I'll be married. Who I marry, how I marry, what I do in my marriage, all free will. So my soul has choices and can expand. So that's what the book's about. All of those,
that's beautiful,
and more and more.
And those are such big questions that I think all of us have, and I think when we get into I would say like the muck of the human side of it, when we're working through it, when it feels overwhelming, when we're trying to do the healing work of our human wounds, it can feel so overwhelming. And be like, why is this happening? Why are we going through this? Why do I have to experience this? And understanding that there is not only our internal intelligence about it, that like we've chosen this and that it's going to turn into something really beautiful and alchemaic. I think that having a book like this is really important for people to understand that process, because it can also be very lonely and sometimes disorienting to go through healing in the human experience.
Absolutely. I mean, we all are alone in our own grief, aren't we? No one grieves like us. No one, no matter what they've gone through, could be the exact same loss and they don't grieve the way we grieve. So yes, it can be very lonely. And I really believe the spirit world wants nothing but healing for us. And so they've given us this beautiful soul to take us down roads that aren't yet paved, but also roads that we can understand some kind of a future healing from. And, it's like the domino effect. So if I make a free will choice, it's a domino effect, isn't it?
Yes.
People say, well, then they plan what it's going to look like. No, it's the domino effect of being human. But the soul is there to heal all of it. And the goal is to love that part of us, even the mistakes, because the mistakes are actually our greatest teachers.
Absolutely. I've learned that over and over. And now I'm just coming in these last 10 years, just really embracing that, and knowing there is this divine intelligence within myself and within the universe. And like, I can keep on moving forward. So in talking about and tying in the grief, I think in some ways it might seem obvious if you have mediumship and you can see spirits and be on the other side that you would be connected to grief. But I'm imagining the grief work that you're doing is a lot more layered and more complex than that. I had 2 family members pass away by suicide, and that sent me into sort of like I went into a deep dive of trying to understand my own grief. But for you and the work that you do, and the addiction work, like you're not just helping people with grief with death. I mean, you're helping them like the whole spectrum. And so what does that look like?
Well, I have two brothers and a mother who committed suicide, and I'm sorry you experienced that, but I know you're more because of it. So with grief, we learn to be more because of it, not in spite of it.
Right.
And that's a choice. It's a choice, but it helps us expand. We are grieving from the moment we are born. We are grieving. It's a grief. I mean, if you lose a pencil that you love, you go through the grief process. So we are already prepared by the time we have the big griefs, most of us, because we've been grieving even through birth, getting born here. We were grieving, trying to fight that. No, I don't want to go out and they're poking me. And who are these people? Now we get in our arms of our mothers and it's like, oh, right. And then the grief starts.
That is so profound, Susan.
Yeah. You take away my blankie, my diaper, whatever. My granddaughter didn't want her diaper gone. She would cry, my diaper. And I'd see the grief in her. But I knew it was what her lessons were to get to whatever grief she had to face later. So, and even though grief is singular and we're alone in it, it is also cathartic. It has the ability to make us better and more if we choose it. Of course, it's a choice. It doesn't mean that they want us to feel the pain, but it's part of the human experience. Grief is in charge. It does not decide. You don't decide when you're done with grief. It decides when it's done with you. Yeah. And it may never be. It may never be. I always tell people it's in the corner doing push-ups. Okay, remember that. And so when you go out into the world and you're looking at a can of beans in the grocery store, here it comes, bam, right? And it's strong. We think it's going to.
Oh my gosh.
And we're thinking it's going to dissipate, and it doesn't dissipate.
No.
And so, but it gets more far apart, where we might go in the grocery store and every time we're in it, we're sobbing. It might be once a month. It might be once a week. It might be once a year.
Right.
So it moves out a little bit, but they're not looking. Death is, of course, the highest level of grief and pain. I see it, especially with their people's children. It's the worst of the worst. And
yeah.
And they're not, it's not that grief is okay and death isn't okay, but what we do with it does matter. And when we recognize that, it's not that we are better because they died on us. We're better because what we do with the fact that they died on us.
Right.
We have to make friends with it. So everyone always asks me when they come to my office, why? Why? And I say, why won't heal you? The what and the how will heal you. What do I need to do next to understand this, and how do I do it? That's moving into it. What you run from chases you. What you try to control controls you. You have to move into it in order to heal it. And that's the scary part. But your soul's waiting. It's waiting for you to do that to help you.
And that's the paradox.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It seems so counterintuitive to run into it. And most of us do want to run away from it and grief in all its forms. And I think there's so many people who experience grief for the first time, how like they just want to be over with it. And even in my experience, I'll just speak for myself personally too. I was also surprised how much it does stay with me. And you're right. I'm dying laughing about that analogy with the push-ups, because that is spot on. It's like, when you least expect it, bam, it gets you, and you just never know. And it's just like in the weirdest moments. And then in some ways it sort of morphs as you work with it, and it turns into sweetness. And I've had a couple moments in my life where like a song will come on and I recognize it as, my biological mother who's passed away, or like something about my brother. And I don't feel sad, but I feel happy. And that transition is also really beautiful, to be able to get to that other side in your grief.
Absolutely. But if you told a mother that just lost her child, she'd probably punch us.
Yes.
I'm so what I say to them is that you will find your footing if you allow it. If you allow yourself to walk the path, you will find your footing. It's not that you're going the wrong direction. It's that you're going to different directions. I want to heal, but I got to feel the grief. So you're not going the wrong direction. You just have to put your feet the right direction, which is I have to feel the grief to heal. That's both of them on the same path.
So
we feel split.
Yeah. I wonder too, in this discussion of the other side, the grief and the mediumship, I wondered if there's anything in particular that stands out to you when you talk to people from the other side, or you make those connections with your clients. Is there something overwhelming that people on the other side want us to know about us living in this life that would be important for us to know? Are there themes? Is there anything like that jumps out at you that they're like, do
Yes.
this?
Well, I think they want us to let go of the control. So let go and allow life. Don't control life. But they also want us to know that they're here, and we fight that. You know, we tell ourselves in our head, oh, that's not them talking. That's what I think they'd say. And they go, okay, now I can't use that way to give them a sign. So we have to be, I call it the 3 A's. It's awareness, acceptance, and action. You were aware that they're there, and they're aware you're aware. And when I teach, this is what I teach my students. You accept that they're there, and they see that you've accepted that. And then the action is trust. You trust that they're giving you messages, and they know you're trusting it. So what are they going to do? I'm coming in. She trusts it. I'm going to give her messages. So what we do is we go, I'm aware something's here, but it can't be. I must be imagining it. What do they do with that? What can they do with that? They can keep trying. So becoming aware of their existence is very important for them. And so that they can let you know that they're here loving you. They're in you, through you, around you. I'm not a believer in the belief system of some mediums, and I honor their beliefs, everyone's, but I'm not a believer that they can read our minds and see everything. I don't think they need to. They're not the human experience. They have no necessity to do that. So I don't feel threatened in any way, like, oh my God, they know everything. But what I do feel good about is that I know they're right there beside me vibrationally. And if I raise my vibration, I can feel them. But you have to remember that grief is the lowest of vibration. It's like lowest. So you have the sloth, which is grief, that moves really slow. And then you have the butterfly, like a medium, who is a higher vibration, and they're the hummingbird, right? By the time the sloth has the opportunity to look and see them, they've already gone 60 million places. So, and grief is the lowest of vibration, the slowest moving vibration. So they have a very hard time getting through it. So raising that a little bit, some music, some laughter, willingness, acceptance, any of those things, they go, vibration's rising, I'm coming in. And that's what they want. That's what they want us to know. They're there.
Yeah. And they want to help us, right? I think we hear that a lot, is that they're there and they see us struggling and they want to help us, right?
They want to help us with our loss, and they would love to help us with our journey, but they can't. And I'm going to tell you why. If they could help us, they would do everything for us because they love us, and they'd become very controlling, and we would never learn anything. They keep every pain away, right?
Yeah.
So they can't interfere like that. We have free will.
Yes.
And that's what makes sense. It has to make sense. The spirit world makes sense. It has to, and it does. And when we recognize that, we don't have to guess anymore. It's like, oh, that makes sense. When it doesn't make sense to your soul, toss it aside. It doesn't belong to you.
Yeah. Interesting. I know you also do a lot of work with past life regression, And one of the questions I really wanted to ask you is, why is it that some of our trauma, pain, and experiences from previous lives do seem to interconnect with our current lives and vice versa, whether they're negative or positive? How is that overlap? Can you explain that, or do you understand? How do you understand it to sort of come through our current human form?
It's by choosing. So we may go through an experience that we feel like we didn't finalize. Just like anything, we want to finalize things, right? We want closure. It's our humanness, right? So when we go through an experience that we don't feel like we finalized or we had closure on, we might be up there saying, I want to try this again a different way so that I might understand it better, so that my soul can get that expansion it was looking for. So we choose it. Now, not I don't believe we choose everything. Again, I'm going to say that, but we do choose learning, the learning of it. And then we have new choices to make. And so we can expand more and more and more in that knowledge. So I believe that's why, number one, we don't remember, but number two, why we're repeating. It's for growth.
Yeah, for growth. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because I know, and I've had lots of people come in here and talk about this, and I'm really curious about your perspective on it and everything that you've learned in all of your experiences and with all of your gifts is like this, this lack of remembering, even though we're completely connected to our soul, I think is so frustrating at some level in the human form, because you're just like, if I could just remember, like everything would be okay, And sometimes I know for me, I'm not like intuitive. I wouldn't consider myself intuitive or have any special gifts, but there are moments where I feel the clarity of my knowing coming in, and I'm like, I know I'm remembering something that's otherworldly or from something else. And it's just like, why can't it all just come? Like why, but it's the lessons. So what for you, what is, I guess, put some softness around, we don't remember and that's okay. And like,
Well, we're
where
not
are you
meant
at on
to.
that?
If we
Yeah.
if we remembered, we would make choices based on our memory, not our journey. Our journey is everything. And I
Yeah.
know that if I could remember something I did wrong in a past life, I wouldn't repeat it, even though I came here to learn how to make a different choice. It would dictate
Mm,
my choices. And so my growth would be minimal. We're here for the
right.
expansion of growth. This is the experiential place where we have to
Mm-hmm.
experience it to understand it. If I told you about the ocean and you'd never seen it, but you read all about it, I told you all about it, everyone talked about it, but you'd never seen it, you would not know the ocean until you put your toes in it, till the salt air hits you. Experience it. Really
Mm-hmm.
experience it. So we come here for that. And a lot of our experiences are beautiful. But we also come here to expand our soul. And that comes from choices. I would choose differently if I remembered everything. And so we want
Right.
freedom to make choices based on now, this journey, so that we
Mm-hmm.
don't slight ourselves from our growth.
I love that you said that. I also wanted to ask you, you also taught, obviously you do a lot of healing work in everything you do. So you're doing it in the addiction and the grief and healing with your own life and with the people that work with you. But there's something that really stuck out to me on your profile and in the work that you do. There is a mention a couple of times of like healers need healing too. And I think healing like grief is one of those things where people feel like there should be a destination, but sometimes it's working its way slowly through the entirety of our life experience. So when we think about healers, particularly because there's lots of them that tune into the show and that are doing just the most important work like you are to the collective, to helping people actualize and expand and liberate and all of those things, like what can we say to them about their own healing experience and how to stay the course and keep some level of stamina and optimism about it as they move through their own experience?
Well, our experiences teach us how to help others, so they're necessary. And as we're moving through those experiences, if we're even a step ahead, one minute step ahead, we're able to teach past, right? And what we've
Yes.
experienced. And so it's not book knowledge, it's internal soul knowledge. And also remember, when we're doing healing work, spirit steps in. Spirit takes charge. We are not in
Mm,
charge. We are simply the conduit. And when we remember that, we don't get our ego in the way, which is our pain, our suffering, our healing, our needs. And so they're speaking through us. And so we don't have to heal everything. Also, the healer is healing themselves as they're healing others, because spirit's talking to them too. So we can
mm-hmm.
utilize every avenue of healing, of the healing process, for ourselves and others. It's very empowering to know that. I don't have to know all the answers to be a healer, because spirit knows all the answers. And that's what's working through me. I'm not the healer. They are. I'm the conduit to the healing. And I am called a healer here because we had to put a label on it, a name on it. But that's all it
Mm-hmm.
is. And as I'm healing, others are healing around me. We bring to us what is needed for us.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for saying that. And for people that are just coming into contact with their healing experience, like whether that's grief, loss, job loss, it can be really frightening to try to confront what you feel and to make sense of it. And I think a lot of us, when something bad happens, like we go to this blaming place of like, I deserved this, or this happened because of, we rationalize it in like very negative ways. I wondered if you have anything to say about that process and people coming into contact with trying to do their own self-healing at the beginning.
Well, I really believe that's why I'm writing the second book, to be honest with you. It's called The
Mm-hmm.
Two-Sided Mirror for a reason. We have two sides to us. We're a soul having a human experience, but we're also a human having a soul experience. So we
Right.
are both. And that soul level helps us heal anything that we're going through if we step into it. But when we're in newness of grief, you have to remember, grief's in charge. It decides when it's done with you. You don't decide when you're over it. It takes
Mm-hmm.
control, and it's in a corner, like I said, doing push-ups. It's that little monster, and it comes out, and we have to face it. We have to face it. People always ask me why, the why. Why am I going through this? Even healers that I work with, why am I going through this? And I say, it doesn't matter why. It won't do a thing for you to know that. The how and the what is what matters. Ask those questions. What do I need to do differently to get through this, and how do I do it? That's where you're going to get help. The why won't tell you anything. Think of all the times that you've heard the why and you go, but I still feel crappy. Didn't work,
Yes.
right? But when you know how and what you need to do, then you can take those actions. There has to be an actionable thing going on in order for you to move through the grief. You must go through it. You must confront it. You have to step into it in order for it to be visible enough to you, to feel it enough to heal it. You have to feel it to heal it. So the spirit world gives us this amazing capacity to numb just long enough to take a break and breathe. And then we're back into having to understand it again. Fear, what we fear, we feed. And if we feed the fear of grief, we're going to be feeding it our whole lives because it's always there. So we have to accept that it's part of what we're meant to learn. It's another one of the emotions. Do I like it? Absolutely not. Do I want it? Nope, I don't. I'm just like everybody else, but I accept it is part of the journey, and it teaches me my greatest lesson. Let go and allow. Be where you are right now. I get into fear and I'll go, oh my gosh, what if I lose a child? Because I work with a lot of children that are parents that have lost their children. It's very painful for me. I don't take it lightly. And I'll say, oh my gosh, what if I lost a child? And then I go, oh, not today, Susan. You're feeding your fear. It's not real, but it's going to become your truth and your reality if you keep this up, because you're going to feel it. And it's not necessary today, Susan. Not today. So I have to bring myself back to the now. And what is it I'm going through right now that I need to be dealing with, not what my perception is of the future that I can't control. Be in here right now, and you can heal anything.
Fear is such a saboteur in so many ways. I mean, it really does, like, in some ways it feels insurmountable. And when you fear something and you feel the physical reaction of the fear that your thoughts are feeding you, it's such a real thing to try to bring yourself back into that present moment awareness that you're talking about, and just like, stop the train from going off the tracks. So I love that you said that, because I think that's really important to hear.
Yeah, and one way to do that, just to give your listeners some thought about this, is to stay where your feet are, literally. So what I do with my clients is I say, okay, you're worried about your next child possibly dying because you've lost a child, and I understand you have this fear and this pain, but I want you to tell yourself, what are you doing right now? Where are your feet? Well, you're in the kitchen, you have tennis shoes on, you're stirring the pot of spaghetti, you're going to wash the dishes while you do it, your other child's talking to you. Be present, be where your feet are. And when they do that, it pulls, you can't think of two things at one time. It pulls you back to this moment, this space, this time, so that you can release that fear and that panic, because they get anxiety and panic attacks over that. So it brings you back to the now. And so the greatest lesson, stay where your feet are. I don't do it all the time. I admittedly am human. But it's an important process to do if you start to get that panic and you start to project into something that isn't existing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm asking this question out of order because I missed it here on my list here, but I want to come back to it. I'm so sorry about this. I did want to ask a follow-up question when we're thinking about when we're choosing our soul's life, and and this is more in alignment with like your book and the lessons that we're choosing and the things that we're deciding that we want to experience and overcome here in this life. I think sometimes too, if we're doing this work, it's very obvious if we take that on as an idea of how we're going to get through this life, I feel like I can power through, because I'm learning, I'm expanding, I can alchemize things. But then I know there's people that will get caught up because then they can't apply it to other people who are not doing that same work. So I wondered if you had anything to say from like a compassionate standpoint. We are all doing this, whether we realize it or not, right? Like you and I are more vocal about it and clear about it. And lots of people on the path of spirituality and healing and leveling up in this consciousness and expansion, like we know what we're doing. I think we do for the most part, but what for everyone that we are seeing that doesn't know that they're doing it, how do we hold compassion and love and kindness for the experiences they are choosing that are hard to watch at times?
I love the question you're asking me. I teach people to meet people right where they are. We're all on a different path. And we're all meant to be on the path we're on in some form. And we all grow at different levels and in different ways. We are singular, yet we are unity. So when we can look at it that way in our consciousness, we understand that, of course, you're not going to be right where I were. Number one, I'd never learn a lesson from you if you were right where I was. I need you to be in a different space so that I can look at me. And I can grow, and vice versa. So I always tell people, I know it's difficult and you have to set boundaries and take care of yourself, obviously. And boundaries aren't about other people. They're about us. What are we going to do when they cross them? Because if we have to set them, they're going to cross them. But it's being able to meet them in a place where they are and saying, I'm not in charge. I'm not the paver of their path, nor am I the paver of my path. What I'm going to do is be in acceptance that they are where they are and decide whether or not I can handle that in my journey right now. That's a choice you can make. And then go from there.
Yeah.
So it's discernment, not judgment.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's key. We'll underline that one 3 times.
Yes.
As my last question here, because we're getting close to the end, I did want to ask, I guess, kind of like a general question about when people cross over. And like, I grew up in a very culty version of Catholicism, so there was a lot of fear around death and like hell and purgatory and all the things. And for most of my young adulthood, there was just so much fear around people dying, and like everyone was so concerned about like where they went. I don't know if you can like provide any light, some information about like what happens to us when we go over. Like, do we need to be scared? Can we normalize like it's not so scary?
No, there's no fear there. They don't have a human mind. We keep putting human emotions on the spirit world. That's the only thing we know to do. But they don't think like we think. They don't have that. People go, why now? Why don't they have it? And I go, because they don't take their brain. The heart has 40,000 neurons. It's a memory learner. It's got memory capacity, learning capacity. It goes, that's where our soul seats, and it goes over there. And so we're not taking all this junk. And so there is nothing to fear. Fear doesn't exist there. We understand the beginning, the middle, and the end, and why things are the way they are. So what do we fear? There's nothing to fear. It is peace, but exciting. It vibrates. It's filled with excitement. It's not boring peace, like you're not just floating around like people think. But I don't want to die. I want to have margaritas with my girls and all those things. I don't want to leave the planet, and I don't want to be sick. So I think we fear more the process of death. Because ultimately, I think people logically know that if it isn't an afterlife, it doesn't matter. We won't be anywhere, so we won't know. And if there is, wonderful. And I think that most humans recognize that. So it's the fear of what the process and the fear of grieving someone we do love. But the other, the side next to us, the other vibration, is all about peace and love. It is love. It is love. There is nothing else. And love does not contain fear. Love is peaceful. Love is knowing. Love is easy. It's gentle. It's a whisper. It's not some down here. It's like power force, right? I love him. I want him. But up there, it's a whisper, and it's a knowing. And so there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to be afraid of, because everyone on the other side is love. And that's where we come from. Hence, the greatest capacity we have here is to love others. It's loving ourselves. That's our true soul path. It's the hardest thing we do. As we're doing these lives, we're learning to love ourselves, because we're making different choices and we're expanding, etc. And we have to love the parts we do wrong, because those are what teach us how to do right. So we have to love that too. And if we embrace that, our soul is expanding wildly. By the time we're over there, we're in a safe space to process all of it and look at it as a learning lesson. And then we go, okay, let's come back here and do it more, which I don't know is always the greatest idea, but it's definitely a needed idea.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Well, we'll have to leave it there, but I do want to open up some space for you to tell everybody like what you have going on. I don't know if you've got like speaking engagements coming up or classes or retreats, like whatever you've got rolling around for the next, 3-6 months, you can shout that out here now.
So Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, my book comes out July 16th. And if they go to Susan Grau Official on social media, they'll find me and they'll find my events. I'm doing Hay House next week. I'll be doing an event with James Van Praagh and Sean Leonard, who is the spirit talker in Canada. I'm really excited about that. It's a Zoom event. It's free. All you have to do is go on my social media and put spirit and you get the link. And a couple weeks after that, I'm doing Gaia. I'll be on Beyond Belief with George Norrie. So that's my next step. I'm working on an event right now, a singular event, but I haven't solidified it because with the book coming, I'm so all over the place.
I'm sure busy.
Yeah, I'm doing Anita Morjani's Sanctuary with her, which Anita was a near-death experiencer, and most people in this field know who she is, but she's actually a renowned speaker about her near-death experience and the love of spirit. And so I'll be doing that with her, and that will come out before the book or right around the book time. So I've got a lot of things that are going on, especially podcasts, and I'm excited about that. I do one-on-ones with people, which is ultimately my what I do. And so they can make an appointment with me to see me. They can process their grief. They can talk to their loved ones. So there's just a lot there to unpack, honestly. But I would say going to Susan Grau Official or susangrau.com will tell them a lot. I do teach, but it's in my office.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, we'll include all of that in the show notes. So thank you for that. And I always end with some gratitude. So I always want to check in with my guest and ask them what 3 things they're grateful, like in this moment, in this week, this year, sort of anything that's in your heart center at the moment.
At the moment, this podcast I'm grateful for, to be honest with you. And I mean that sincerely. I don't just say that lightly. It's getting the word out, right? It's helping others heal. And I'm grateful for that because so many people don't do that. I'm grateful for my family. You know, my family is the top of my chain. They're number one to me. I'm grateful for the spirit world, and I'm grateful to have the ability to help others to heal. It's the greatest gift they've given me. And we all have gifts. Some people can sit at the piano and play beautifully. I can't do that. We all have gifts. This just happens to be a kind of cool one. It's kind of a cool one.
It's very cool.
I'm grateful. Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I had such a great time with you. Time flew. Yeah, thank you for coming and for doing the work that you do. I'm hyper passionate about healing. Like I will scream it to the rooftops because I know that it's the most important work that we can do here to liberate and integrate and come home to ourselves. So I love that you're doing it in your space of the world and that you are allowing people the dignity of their own process through your beautiful light and the love that you're sharing. So thank you so much for coming to the show and being a part of my little world for a little bit. And I have no doubt you'll be out in the world doing beautiful things to come.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to be on your podcast, and I'm grateful that you invited me in.
You're so welcome, Susan.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Ziomata, in alignment with light casting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.